The glucose monitor alarm screamed, but no alert left the room. No signal reached the towers that should have forwarded it. Inside the Pinecrest HOA, an elderly diabetic woman clutched the device, her phone dead on the nightstand. 11 miles away, her son Ethan's phone showed no service. He tried 911 again and again.
911. Why won't you connect? Come on.
He drove frantic to her house, burst through the front door, and found her collapsed beside the bed.
Mom, no, wake up, please.
The paramedics arrived 4 minutes later. Too late. The monitor had recorded the critical spike hours before, with no way to send it. One woman's life cut short because a single voice couldn't travel through a dead network 8 months earlier. None of this was inevitable. A 180-foot monopole stood on a ranch bordering Pinecrest, leased to 3 major carriers. But the HOA Design Review Chair, Stephanie Vance, had already started calling it a visual blight, and she wanted it gone. Daniel Reeves owned that monopole. Leased to 3 carriers, it generated $12,000 every month. Passive income he'd built his retirement around.
That rusting spike is a visual blight on our property values. We have to kill it now.
A certified letter demanded he justify the structure before the county zoning board within 30 days.
So the HOA finally launched their war over my retirement plan.
I filed the formal complaint this morning. Scenic preservation gives us the legal cover.
Chairman Morris set a hearing date. The county board had taken the bait.
Every Pinecrest resident who believes in aesthetics will be in that room.
She thinks this is about curb appeal. The carriers see a coverage gap big enough to sue over.
The HOA resolution passed unanimously, and the community bulletin blasted the campaign.
We'll have that eyesore down by summer. Just watch.
The zoning hearing was still 6 weeks out, but the carriers had already sent their network engineers to map the coverage gap.
We'll hear the complaint under Scenic Preservation Code 14.2. Miss Vance, you have the floor.
That tower scrapes the skyline from every backyard in Pinecrest. It's a rusty middle finger to our community standards.
If that hearing goes against us, the carriers will sue the county for violating the Telecommunications Act. They'll name the HOA as a co-defendant.
They're not listening, Brian. Stephanie thinks she's untouchable.
Brian sent certified warning letters to the HOA board and every carrier outlining the liability and the 911 impact. Stephanie didn't even open hers.
Fear-mongering from a retired lineman who likes ugly steel. Nobody in Pinecrest believes him.
This board will decide on aesthetic merit alone. Counsel for the tower owner may present, but we aren't a telecom regulator.
They're stacking the deck. Scenic preservation is just a weapon.
The hearing date was set for the second week of March. Every warning letter had been ignored, every expert testimony dismissed. The tower's fate now rested with 5 strangers. On the second Tuesday in March, the county boardroom was packed. Stephanie's supporters filled the front rows, wearing coordinated green scarves. The carrier's attorney presented coverage maps and 911 outage projections. Chairman Morris barely looked up from his notepad.
This board finds the structure incompatible with the scenic character of the area. The conditional use permit is revoked. Demolish within 60 days.
We did it. The blight is coming down.
They just cut off 911 for 1,400 homes, and they're celebrating.
Brian delivered a final written warning to the HOA board that same afternoon. They tabled it without discussion.
8 months of harassment, and now they're tearing down my livelihood and everyone's safety net.
We'll appeal, but this board is hostile. Start preparing for the day the tower comes down.
The demolition order was final. A wrecking crew was contracted for the following Tuesday at 7 a.m. The tower had 6 days left. Daniel's phones were silent. The morning of the demolition, Daniel parked at the fence line, coffee untouched on the dash.
They're cutting into the base already. 8 months, and it ends in 20 minutes.
The steel groaned as bolts sheared. The tower folded and crashed into the dirt. From the air, The brown cloud drifted toward the gated community. When it settled, residents on patios toasted with mimosas. The ugly tower was gone.
Say goodbye to the Rust Bucket Pinecrest. This is what scenic preservation looks like.
By noon, the carriers issued an advisory. 911 disruption immediate. No backup within range. Liability follows. Brian called the HOA president. The call lasted 47 seconds before the dial tone.
Let them sue. We have better lawyers.
They celebrated. 1,400 homes lost connectivity without a single warning. By Wednesday morning, the first reboot had failed. Every phone in Pinecrest displayed the same 3 words: no service. Security alarms blared without anyone to hear them. Smart locks stayed frozen, trapping residents inside their own foyers. The nearest replacement tower stood 11 miles away, and its capacity collapsed under 1,500 desperate connections. 911 operators took calls that cut to silence. Coordinates never reached dispatch. The termination email landed at 9:12 a.m. Your position is terminated effective immediately due to unexplained absence from client deliverables. A second remote worker, a data analyst, was locked out of the company VPN. Her meeting invite expired mid-presentation. She never got to explain. By 10 a.m., the clubhouse was standing room only. Residents held up phones like evidence in a trial. The backup tower's overload indicator lit up solid red. No capacity, no coverage, no emergency bypass. For the first time since the gates opened, Pinecrest had no voice and no way to call for help. The celebration had lasted less than 24 hours. The reckoning was only beginning. Inside a corner bedroom on Oakview Lane, a glucose monitor began flashing red. It tried to reach its server, but every tower in range was silent. Ethan Cole checked the alert on his phone. No service. He tried his mother's landline. Dead. He bolted for his truck.
She's diabetic. If her monitor can't reach me, she's got nothing. Come on.
He raced 6 miles and flung open the front door. On the bedroom floor, his mother lay still. The monitor's screen glowed with the words, "No signal," beside a 42 reading.
Stay with me. Please, stay with me.
Paramedics arrived in minutes. They worked over her for almost 20. Then one of them shook his head. The monitor's internal log showed the spike occurred at 6:32 a.m. The alert was queued 4 times, but never sent. The tower that would have carried it lay in a scrap heap.
They took the one thing that connected her to me.
Word spread through Pinecrest in whispers, and then in shouts. The outage wasn't just an inconvenience. It was deadly. In the chaos, a single name began to circulate, first in anger, then in fury: Stephanie Vance. The following Tuesday, a process server walked up Stephanie's driveway and handed her a thick envelope while neighbors recorded. The top page read, "Complaint for wrongful death, negligence, and public nuisance. Defendants, Pinecrest, HOA, County Zoning Board, Stephanie Vance."
This is a shakedown. I followed every scenic preservation guideline to the letter.
That evening, the HOA board called an emergency session. 40 residents crammed into the clubhouse, and they weren't there for status updates.
Your guideline cut the wire that kept my mother alive. You didn't preserve scenery. You destroyed lives.
A retired nurse stood up next. "My husband's medical alert didn't fire. He's 83. What if he falls?"
The carriers should have built a backup. This is their failure, not mine.
The room erupted. Someone shouted for a vote of no confidence. The board president had to bang his gavel 3 times. By motion, the board was ordered to explore every legal and technical option, starting with a full investigation of who ignored the carrier warnings. And in the corner, Stephanie stood alone, her pink blazer suddenly looking like a target. The board retained a telecom consultant. 3 days later, she spread a printed FCC coverage map across the conference table.
This is a pressure tactic. There has to be another site outside the ring.
The consultant shook her head. The only parcel inside the 5-mile radius with zoning, terrain, and access was a strip of ranch land owned by Daniel Reeves. The room went silent. The same man whose tower they had demolished held the only key to restoring service. One board member asked what options remained. The consultant answered flatly, "Negotiate with Reeves or live without service. There is no third path."
We are not giving that man a single dollar. He'll extort us.
The board president cut her off. With a wrongful death suit moving forward, he said they'd negotiate. The vote was 6-1. Stephanie abstained, her jaw tight, the pink blazer suddenly a shade of surrender. By noon the next day, a certified request for negotiations was hand-delivered to Daniel's ranch gate. The HOA that had sworn to tear down the ugly tower was now begging its owner for a new one, and Daniel already knew. 48 hours later, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with Brian and a freshly printed contract. 5 sections, single-spaced, bound in navy blue.
I am not just replacing the tower, Brian. I am replacing the people who tore it down.
They walked into the HOA conference room at 2 p.m. Daniel placed the contract in the center of the mahogany table and didn't sit.
Here is the deal. 1 tower, 3 carriers, and a new lease rate that reflects current market value. 4 times what you made me lose.
Section 4, read, "Lesser shall hold irrevocable veto authority over any and all architectural modifications proposed by the Pinecrest Homeowners Association, including but not limited to gates, facades, and common structures." The HOA's attorney read the clause twice, thumb pressing the paper until it creased. The room went still. Someone's pen rolled off the table, and nobody reached for it.
This isn't a negotiation. It's a hostage note. You think we'll sign away our design control to you?
Daniel didn't answer. He simply slid a pen across the tabletop. Stephanie grabbed her bag and walked out. The board president stared at the unsigned contract. The room hummed with panic. Daniel leaned back, crossed his arms, and watched. Daniel left the room, with the ink still wet on nothing. The board moved to closed session, and the real war began. One board member broke the silence. A retired litigator. He spread the lawsuit filing across the table like a guilty verdict. Their attorney spoke first. "The liability exposure," he said, "could bankrupt the HOA 4 times over." Another voice cut through. "So we give that rancher veto power over our homes." The room divided, old alliances cracking.
This is exactly what I warned about. You are letting a vindictive operator dictate our architectural standards.
Outside, residents learned of the meeting. They gathered with homemade signs and dead phones held high. One resident shouted that her husband's CPAP couldn't call for help. Another held his company termination email on his tablet. The board listened to the noise outside. The president called the question. "All in favor of recommending the contract to the membership, raise your hand." 6 hands went up. 1 remained flat on the table. Stephanie Vance. The gavel dropped. The board president announced a special membership meeting in 48 hours. The fate of Pinecrest now rested with every homeowner. The special membership meeting filled the clubhouse past capacity. Every seat was taken, every aisle clogged, and every phone in the room read "no service." Ethan Cole walked to the microphone, carrying his mother's glucose monitor in one hand. The crowd parted for him.
This device couldn't send an alert because Stephanie Vance decided a piece of steel ruined her view. My mother's blood sugar dropped to 42, and she died alone because you took away the one wire that connected her to me.
Silence. Then a wave of noise. Someone shouted, "Shame." Another yelled, "Resign."
I followed the law. This is a tragedy, but blaming me is.
The crowd drowned her out. The board president stood, gavel in hand, and called for a vote on accepting Daniel Reeves' contract. A show of hands. Nearly every resident raised theirs. The contract was approved by 93%. Then a second motion. to remove Stephanie Vance as design review chair. The board president asked for eyes. The response shook the windows. Stephanie's face drained. She stood, then sat, then stood again. The pink blazer looked 2 sizes too large. She turned and walked toward the exit without a word. The board president slid the contract across the table to Daniel, who signed without ceremony. The HOA had traded its autonomy for a dial tone. Daniel filed the permit application the next morning. Tower height, 200 feet. Rooftop lights, 3 red aviation beacons, synchronized to strobe dusk to dawn. The HOA received the public notice digitally. Within an hour, the board president called an informal huddle, faces drawn. One member muttered something about rubbing it in. Another just shook his head. They had no legal grounds to object.
They wanted an eyesore gone. I am giving them a landmark, and they'll pay me $50,000 a month to keep it.
On Monday, a crane rolled onto the parcel. 8 concrete trucks lined the dusty road. Daniel's crew sank the rebar cage where the old tower had stood. From Pinecrest patios, the steel skeleton rose daily, audacious, unmissable, and already 30 feet taller than the original. A resident stopped Daniel at the gate. This monstrosity blinks all night. You've made it worse. Daniel just tapped the clipboard.
You signed the contract, not me. Section 2, paragraph 3. I am building exactly what the spec allows.
The board tried an emergency objection at the county level, citing glare. The county clerk referred them to the contract's non-interference clause. By the 3rd week, the tower loomed over Pinecrest, its steel still bare, its warning lights already wired. Daniel stood beneath it, arms crossed. The HOA's attorney filed a last-ditch objection. The county clerk returned it stamped, "Refer to Section 7, non-obstruction." Daniel read the rejection from his kitchen table. Brian had built that clause for exactly this moment. He drove to the worksite where the HOA had flagged the compound fence for design review. Daniel zip-tied the contract to the chain link.
This fence is tower infrastructure. Section 4 gives me exclusive oversight. No review needed.
The board president called an emergency con call. 20 minutes later, they voted to approve Daniel's fence 6-0. Daniel sent back additional requirements: a retention basin, gravel path, and a sign. All non-negotiable.
They wrecked my future. Now I am building a landmark, and they're paying for every bolt.
The fence rose, 8 feet of chain link, topped with razor wire. Neighbors complained, but the non-interference clause gagged them. The new design review chair tried to schedule a meeting about the tower. Daniel reminded them that any opposing vote would be vetoed. The meeting was canceled. The compound stood unchallenged, its warning lights unlit, but its message clear. On the last day of construction, a carrier crew bolted the final panel antenna at 200 feet. The crane pulled back. Daniel watched from the compound fence as a technician sealed the equipment cabinet. The data light flickered green. Seconds later, the first HOA resident raised her phone. 5 bars. The signal had returned, stronger, faster, and ring-fenced by Daniel's contract. Ethan Cole received the news while packing his mother's belongings. He made the first 911 test call from the driveway. It connected. As dusk fell, the 3 aviation beacons powered on. Red light washed across Pinecrest rooftops in a slow, synchronized pulse. From the air, the tower looked like a heartbeat over the subdivision. Every blink reminded 1,400 homeowners why they couldn't complain. On the freeway, drivers saw the new beacon 15 miles out. Pinecrest had traded a hidden tower for a landmark that would never turn off.
They wanted the old tower gone because it was ugly. Now they have a taller one that blinks. Guess which one I am charging them for?
The first monthly invoice arrived at the HOA office the next morning. $50,000, triple net. The board paid it without comment. The tower stood, lights pulsing. The HOA had service again, but they'd lost much more than they'd ever admit. 2 months after the tower went live, the HOA board submitted plans for a new gatehouse with a fountain centerpiece. The funds were already allocated from reserves. The plans were forwarded to Daniel Reeves under Section 4. He reviewed them at his kitchen table, red pen in hand. He drew a straight line from the tower's GPS coordinates. The fountain would block his westward sightline by nearly 15 degrees.
Not on my tower's sightline, you don't.
He stamped vetoed across the fountain elevation in black ink. A certified copy hit the HOA office the next morning. The board attorney demanded an emergency session. The guard waved him through without hesitation. Residents watched from the parking lot.
Section 4, Paragraph B. I get final say on any structure that blocks my sightline.
The board canceled the project. The fountain never broke ground. The HOA's design committee had been rendered a paper tiger. As Daniel left, the tower's red lights flickered on, marking his territory without a word. Stephanie was already clearing her office when the IRS levy arrived. Lien against her personal assets for unpaid legal costs tied to the wrongful death suit. The next morning, a tow truck hooked her Range Rover. While neighbors filmed from across the cul-de-sac, she stood at the window, hand pressed to the glass. No one knocked on her door.
That tower wasn't supposed to cost me everything, just an eyesore.
She returned to the clubhouse and filled 2 boxes. The pink blazer went in last, folded tight. Security arrived at 4 p.m. They didn't help her carry the boxes, just flanked the door. Residents gathered in the parking lot. No one spoke. Every face held the same message: leave. She clutched the boxes and walked toward a rideshare idling at the curb. The pink blazer hung limp through the cardboard flap. As the car pulled away, the tower's lights began their evening pulse, a slow, steady beat over the subdivision she no longer controlled. Stephanie Vance was gone from the board and from the community's memory, but the tower kept blinking, and it would never stop. A month after the tower went live, Ethan Cole organized a quiet memorial by the community lake. Just before dusk, he placed a framed photo of his mother on a small table, the glucose monitor that failed beside it.
This device couldn't save her because the signal was dead. But because of that man over there, it won't fail anyone else. I hated that tower once. Now, I am grateful for every blink. It means nobody else has to lose someone like I did.
Daniel stood near the back, arms folded, the tower's shadow stretching across the grass toward him. A retired nurse approached, touched his arm, and whispered a quiet thank you before blending back. Then the crowd shifted, and at the edge of the gathering stood Stephanie. No one had invited her. Eyes turned toward her, not with pity, but with the silent verdict of the community. She didn't come closer. Daniel watched her retreating figure until the dark swallowed it, then turned to the tower's pulsing beacon. The memorial ended, but the tower's red heartbeat would never stop. A permanent guardian over a community that once tried to kill it. A week after the memorial, carrier executives arrived at the ranch with a check the size of a coffee table. The quarterly lease payment had been doubled, $50,000, drawn on the carrier's corporate account. They also handed him a polished plaque, Network Resilience Award, Tower of the Year. He hung the plaque inside the equipment shed, next to his grandfather's old fencing pliers. Across the fence line, Pinecrest's real estate listings were stacking up. 3 homes went on the market that same week.
They wanted the old tower gone because it was ugly. Now they can't sell houses because of what replaced it.
The HOA newsletter omitted any mention. A listing agent privately blamed the tower's visual impact for reduced showings. Daniel received a forwarded email from the board attorney begging the carriers to relocate the dish. It was stamped, declined per Section 7. He walked to the base, checked the compound gate, and looked up at the blinking lights. His revenge was complete. Not loud, not violent, just a tower that never stopped reminding them who won. Late afternoon, Daniel drove his Silverado through the Pinecrest gate, the guard lifting the arm without hesitation. The tower's shadow stretched across manicured lawns and Spanish tile roofs, a dark finger that could never be trimmed. He passed the clubhouse. The sign on the glass read, "Meeting closed." The parking lot was empty, except for a single unused sheriff cruiser. By the time he hit the ranch road, the sun was low, dust pluming behind the tires. The tower stood sentinel on his land. He parked beside the cabin, killed the engine, and walked to the porch he'd built the summer before the lawsuit. A mug of coffee steamed on the rail. He settled into the rocker and watched the tower blink to life. The aviation lights caught the dusk, 3 red pulses, each one a quiet claim over the valley.
They wanted the ugly tower gone. Now I have the tallest one in the county, and it's never going dark.
The rocker creaked. The coffee cooled. The tower blinked, and Daniel didn't move until the stars came out. For the first time in 2 years, the only sound was the wind. 6 weeks later, Stephanie sat in a strip mall temp agency, resume flat on the desk. The recruiter matched her to a receptionist opening in the next county. Starting pay, $17 an hour. Her Pinecrest mansion sold at a $70,000 loss. The moving truck came on a Thursday. Neighbors watched from driveways, arms crossed. She didn't look back. The HOA newsletter landed with a single-sentence update. The board confirms no further challenges to the Reeves Tower contract. Below the fold, a notice about a memorial bench for Evelyn Cole. Daniel read the newsletter in his equipment shed, coffee cup resting on the plaque. He set it down and walked outside, where the tower's lights were beginning their evening ritual. The red pulse washed over the valley, over the HOA, over everything, and nobody asked it to stop. The camera pulled back, rising above the ridge, above the tower, above the tower, above the quiet community. Daniel's silhouette stood on the ridge, arms at his sides, watching the lights of Pinecrest flicker through the dark.
It's just a tower, but it's my tower, and it's never going dark.
The red beacon blinked, and as the lens pulled higher, the valley became a map of small fires. Somewhere down there, Ethan Cole's mother had died because a signal couldn't travel a single mile. Now the tower stood over them all, a monument to the cost of vanity and the price of ignoring what holds a community together. Stephanie Vance was gone, her name already fading. Daniel Reeves was sitting on a porch, a coffee mug beside him. The tower had become the neighborhood's heartbeat, a red pulse that spoke the language of consequence. In the end, the HOA had won its view of a taller tower, brighter lights, and a man who would never let them forget. The camera rose into the stars, and the only sound was the wind and the quiet blink of a light that meant everything was still connected.